Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Gabby, the community manager at Cake, and I'm just here to welcome you to this really cool panel that talks about a topic that is really hot in the moment. And we know how important this is for startups nowadays, and it will always be. So we're happy here to help you. And also, I'm in Sydney at the moment. We've got people everywhere in the world, in Singapore, in Australia, and we would like to know, obviously, where you guys watching from. So to make this really interactive as well, please just pop in the chat, where are you watching from? We'd love to know what is your startup, and if you have any rounds that you've been through, and it will help us to go through all the topics we have as well. So feel free to pop questions in the chat and in the Q&A. We will try to answer as much as we can. I'm not going to talk too much, and I'll pass to our amazing co-founder of Cake, Jason Atkins.
Cool, thanks, Gabby. I'd also like please put in the chat comments or like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for Gabby's jumper today. I was just loving that. We've had a little bit of a brand uplift this month at Cake as well. If you check out our website, cakeequity.com, and I reckon like the color scheme is like so dialed into that. So very impressed. Good to have you all here. Thanks for the light start, Gabby. Look, fundraising is obviously a critical component for most startups. Even bootstrap startups are normally, doing some sort of fundraising, whether it be a bit of friends and family and a bit of angel or, a little bit of growth capital from time to time. So even if you're not getting venture, I think there's not hardly a startup out there that isn't fundraising. And I'm pretty sure we're all aware that it's one of the longest and hardest and most complicated things that we have to do. And most of you guys are not finance professionals or lawyers or whatever. So it's just like a wall of complexity. I'm like a 25-year, formerly like a 20-year finance veteran, even though I don't look that old, I don't think. Anyway, please be nice. And, the last 5 years I've been in tech. And even for me, I just found the complexity of running rounds to be pretty heavy. So this session's all about tips and hacks and best practices and things that you can do to decrease the amount of time that your raise can take, to increase the chance of success, to minimize chance of failure. We've got a cross section of different experiences. Myself, I'm both a founder and I work in this industry, 24/7 for the last 5 or 6 years. And we've got Ashwin coming in from a founder perspective, and we've got Veli as well, a real industry expert, in this space as well, from Lanturn, currently, predominantly in the COSEC space. So we're going to try and tackle a lot of the key topics. Hopefully you guys are going to learn a lot. One thing we will say straight off the bat, and certainly something that I've learned, is that no two raises are the same. Your pre-seed and your seed and your Series A, they're going to be really normally not just, it's unfortunately, even though you've learned all that stuff, like there's always something to learn. So hopefully you can really take something out of this. So let's jump into some intros. The amazing Veli from Lanturn, I might get you to go first, please, mate. Do you want to, say good day and tell us a bit about yourself and, what you're bringing today and what you're hoping to help everyone with?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jace. Thanks for inviting me to join the panel. I am, I spent some time in finance and media, and I'm a sort of repeat founder. I like to think of it as a recovering founder. And I think a big part of that is really the fundraising component, because I agree with you 100%. I think you've been too nice. It's probably the least nice part of running any early stage company, but we can get into the we can kind of
I'm often amazed. I'm like, how is it still so hard? Like, so many founders do this every quarter, and there's so many investors out there.
Yeah.
And there have been some improvements in systemization along the way. And certainly Cake's mission is to make this a lot easier. And I know like Lanturn's in the same space trying to make it easier, but it's just super bloody hard. And there's no two ways about it. So we'll do our best to work through some of that for you guys today.
Yeah. One last thing I would add is that, I mean, we work with a lot. We have about, we're a digital corporate services and fund services business. We've built our own proprietary platforms. We work with 400 clients. It's mainly early stage technology companies doing seed, Series A. We also work with some bigger firms, the ones that have been very good at fundraising and are now doing their Bs, their Cs, and their Ds. And then on top of that, we work with a lot of early stage investors, so VC firms, PE firms, venture debt firms. And I raise that because there's probably not a week when we're not working with one of our clients to help them complete a fundraise. So we're definitely very up close and personal on that.
I love that. It's been great working with you, and looking forward to doing a lot more of it. With 400 clients in that range, I'm sure there's a lot to do. So awesome. And Ashwin, thanks for joining on the founder side of things. It'd be great to get an insider's view throughout this session as well. It's always very valuable for founders and to hear from other founders. Do you want to say good day to everyone, mate?
Yeah, sure. No, first of all, thanks for having me on this call. Much appreciated being with far more experienced founders as well. Would love to learn from you throughout the session. Yeah, I mean, my experiences, to put it nicely, all over the place. I started in a lab in Toronto, pipetting things in 2007. For the corporate, did my time in like boring consulting for 3 years, was in San Francisco, Latin America, did the MBA route, like a lot of young consultants, and ended up in Singapore. I've been here for like 8 years. For those familiar with the brands, been with some e-commerce players here called Shopee, and then Deliveroo, which I think almost everyone on the call should know, irrespective of whether you're in London or in Australia. Was their GM for a while, and then led an e-scooter startup called Lime, which was just about like blitz scaling, irrespective of unit economics or any form of cost restraints, which was a great time.
Cool. That's an awesome experience, I'm sure.
Yes. I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon again. But good.
No, we might have a few years before we see that stuff happening again, or another year or so. Yeah,
exactly.
But amazing experience, and in certain circumstances, absolutely the right strategy. Some companies have really shot the lights out by blitz scaling, and so it takes all the different kinds of strategy to grow and win in all the various markets. And we've got a slightly more challenging market, don't we now, where valuations are coming down, funding's a bit harder to get, VCs are sort of sitting on their hands a little bit, or perhaps they're looking after their existing portfolios. So, I guess as founders, we just adapt, don't we? And we get done, what we can. So awesome. Thanks. Great to have you on board. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, yes, I'm Jason, one of the co-founders of Cake. I don't know exactly how many raises I've run, but I've run a few for Cake, and I've run a few before Cake as well. And I've been working for the last 5 years now with the best VCs, accelerators, and lawyers on really how to run raises the best way possible, how to handle your equity and all those things. I've been mentored and trained by some really elite programs, including StartMate and Airtree. So I've tried to bring all those lessons and all that learning into these sessions and the toolkits and guides and blogs that we have. From Cake perspective, we help startups with equity management. We, like Veli, we focus on sort of seed to Series A, but really right from day one, from pre-seed, up to about Series B is Cake's sweet spot. As you're scaling too, quite often these days, startups have got teams in multiple countries, and Cake's more recently developed the capacity to handle equity plans in 30 countries, which has, become quite a cool sort of product as people try and handle, hiring and engaging and growing teams, but using their equity cross-border. So yeah, we've got like 1,500 startups now and nearly 100,000 investors. So we've learned a lot, and we're going to try and bring, I guess, as much of that into this discussion today. So let's go. Let's get into it. So straight off, let's talk about seed and Series A. I think if people have specific pre-seed questions, please do ask them. A lot of the seed stuff does correlate pretty well with pre-seed, and we'll try and make the odd pre-seed comment as well wherever there's differences, and just to keep the discussion as broad as we can. So we're going to talk through, a little bit about just generally, what are the conditions like? How are things going? What should your raise strategy be? And all that with regard to seed and Series A. So, all right, let's say, let's talk a little bit about the current funding environment. Ashwin, I don't know if you're happy to share a little bit about your most recent raise and your funding strategy, and if you've got a raise coming up or ongoing, just share a little bit about that, please, mate. Founder stories are always a good place to kick off with something like this.
Yeah, would love to. So first of all, we raised on a safe note last year. We raised 1.3 million USD. And last year, as you guys know, was sort of a founder's year. We weren't aware of just how lucky we had it when we were raising. We started looking around in August. We had money in the bank. We had a term sheet signed by early October, money in the bank by early November. Decent timing, nothing really exemplary for that. It was pretty average.
It's pretty perfect timing though, isn't it? Like November, I think, was when the top started happening. Like not everybody knew what it was, but I think that was really, really good timing. Yeah.
Exactly right. So we were just at that cusp before things went sort of belly up. We are now finding a completely different market, right? So back then we pitched to maybe 20 investors. There's a lot of no's. There's of course a lot of discouragement as well, as many founders may find it. And then we kind of got lucky with one VC called Flash, based out of Europe with a presence in Southeast Asia. They have a standard deal. They are quite flexible on that deal if you already have a product and you're also adapting a concept from the US. So we work specifically on takeout food, and we focus on like group buying takeout food. And we're adapting a startup from the US called SnackPass to do that, right? So we are precedent, they're Horowitz back, they've got 100 million. So our story was a lot more clear for our first pitch. So we were able to get that, that round in place. What we're finding now, and I can deep dive into SAFE later if anybody wants to ask individually. What we're finding now is, please tighten your belt. Make sure your runway lasts you at least another year. So we had to make some cuts. We had to make sure our business model withstands at least another 12 months. We're being told a year and a half. That wasn't possible for us. And just get money in the bank already, right? So that's what we're being told.
Awesome.
From different VCs.
Yeah, two great takeaways that I hear a lot there. And one, this is a funny one, and it's a little bit counterintuitive. Please don't take this the wrong way. But when you get your investor, the lead investor, which is obviously the key for any round, it always feels like you got lucky. I had the same thing. Like we did all this work that went for like a year, and then we got into an accelerator, which was another good point. Like, get into a good community, whether it's an accelerator, whether it's with great mentors or, some sort of program. It's amazing how much at the end of those things, funding quite often occurs. It's because you're in really good shape. You've been in the shop window, your pitch is as tight as possible, and then you get lucky, right? But quite often, and I would normally say, and I've been currently being advised. So our lead investor, Jason Atkins, out of the Valley, one of the world's most famous investors, and they have a big program which is called Launch, and the way they run the top of their raise is with 90 introductions. So you need to go out into the world and find 90 investors that invest in your niche at your stage that you can see that are active. You don't just like spam, right? Just to make sure you get your round done. So I think this is really, really, Ashwin sort of said the same thing. He was on a campaign and then he found the right investor. And that for me is the key. So it's a matchmaking process. And unless you talk to enough investors, it's really difficult to find the right one. So that's just a little bit of context from me. I would really echo what Ashwin said. Like we've got obviously lead investors. We're managing our own runway. We're a startup ourselves. We're in like our third, fourth year. We're being told sort of 24 months if you can. Make sure essentially try and get to the point where the company can break even if you can. So being default alive is sort of now the situation, and raising as soon as possible. So it sort of seems that if don't expect necessarily things to get better in 3 or 6 months time or 9 months time. I think the advice is to go hard right now, make sure you get a good financial plan so that you can make it through until the end of 2023. So that's just a bit from me. Veli, anything to add there or that you liked or any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, we have a joke in the office, which is, the next funding round is going to be easy.
Yeah. I'm laughing out of pain. I think that was like a nervous founder laugh.
Yeah, so you come out of like the latest bruising funding round and you're like, oh, the next one will be easy. And there seems to be, every time there seems to be a reason why it's not. So And yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know, fundraising is, as you said, it's incredibly inefficient still. And it's still, I mean, you can have like amazing unit economics, but you're in the wrong part of the fundraising cycle, and you get just kind of caught out. So I think, yeah, it takes an amazing amount of determination. It also takes, like, rhino skin is super helpful. And I think you just kind of start with, you know, with like the stretch case, like, say, go out there and try and kind of swing for the fences and just kind of just claw back your plans over time, depending on the feedback you get, because it literally just takes like one anchor investor to kind of tip everything over the edge. And I think what a lot of people forget is the first 6 months of a fundraise, unless you are like Ashwin, kind of raising at a point in the cycle where people are probably less discerning and more worried about missing out on deals than they are on making good deals. Yeah, unless you're at that point in the cycle, which only lasts for a very short period of time, the first 6 months is literally just a warm-up, right? I mean, you're going out there and you're either renewing relationships with people you know already, or more likely you're meeting a lot of funds that don't know anything about you. And given that they are investing other people's money and they've made commitments to their investors about how they will behave, you can almost guarantee that they will spend 6 months tracking your performance before they make it. So I think somebody asked a question about kind of financial model, and I would say on that point, it's really important when you go out that your projections are realistic. And the way we do projections, and I think we are, like, we're a relatively easy business to forecast, but the way we do our forecast is you start out with a stretch case, you come up with a base case, you then work out a worst case forecast, and that's almost certainly the one I share with everyone. And we usually miss it by 5 points. But the point, I think the point is that, yeah, you got to be really careful when you go out to, well, first of all, go out and speak to as many people as you can, as quickly as you can, and then assume that nothing is going to happen for 6 months, and make sure you hit the forecast that you committed to when you first engaged with people. Well, I guess we've lost Jay. So Ashwin, I mean, so where are you? Can you update us on where you are now? So you're raising again.
Yeah, that's right. So, like what you mentioned, we pretty much, ended up not going with our best case, right? We're hoping to get product market fit first 4 months, rapidly scale to Melbourne. We have the cash to scale to Melbourne. We had a team, we were going to launch, and then, this crisis happened and we got resounding feedback. Don't split your team, don't split your time, most importantly, and don't split your cash. Focus on one market, Singapore, just nail that for that initial round of funding. It's still pre-seed, right? And then use that not only to prove that you've got repeat buying, customer love, as Sequoia likes to call it, but that you've also managed to get some unit economics, right? So you're not burning like $50 to acquire customers. You're able to get it to, half or even less of that value. So those were sort of our two goals for the short term. And we're getting there, but because we focus so much on university students, our audience has gone on summer break, which is why we're hedging with Australia down. So long story short, for us, it's right now, like, we don't have a gun to our temple. A lot of startups already do to fundraise, but we decided to look, times have changed. Let's get money in the bank. Let's extend that runway so that in 6 months' time, when we do have that product market fit, right, defined in various ways by different startups, we can then go and be like, okay, look, it's November, December. We still have 1 year of runway, and we'd like to fundraise now, right? So that's really how we're looking at it. And where the startup's at. But luckily for us, we have a solid team. We have 6 of us. We're quite lean on the commercial side, including me and my co-founder. And we have 4 in-house engineers. We hired them remotely, but they are fully employed by us versus an agency, which I highly recommend against. Talk more about that later. And that's the structure of
totally.
Startup.
Hey, quickly before, just on this, I guess on the overview side of things, I got a couple of points. So firstly, I'd like to say, for the very pre-seed and seed investors out there, like that's part of the market is much more active than the later stage. It's much easier to do evaluation. So the simplest way to do evaluation for a pre-seed and seed company is how much money do you need? And don't ask for too much money, like just ask for the normal amount, so like $1 million or whatever. That's 20% of your equity. Like it's very standard for very early stage deals to be done on a rule of thumb basis. Now it can be negotiated sort of between 10, 25% or whatever, depending on the circumstance, but rounds are done much more on a rule of thumb, and you don't really have any traction normally or really any metrics. So I feel like that stage of the market is more active and it is easier to do evaluation. The later stage companies are harder because they've come off these huge valuations, and how much has the valuation fallen? No one's really sure. There hasn't been too much repricing. So just for those early stage, that's still more active. Angel investors, and in this big cycle that happens, you go from very early stage, so the very beginning of a new cycle, seed and pre-seed are really hot. And then towards the end of the cycles, when the VCs are trying to exit all their portfolios, and that's perhaps just past. So just a few things to think about the cycle there. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that before we just talk about safe notes a bit, because I think a lot of people are going to want to just hear a little bit about safe notes. Anything to add on the cycle and seed investment?
Jace, if I can just add one thing.
You.
Yeah, if I can just add one thing on in terms of where the market is today. Like I think pretty much in Southeast Asia, and actually probably across the whole of APAC, like pretty much the only kinds of deals that are getting funded in what I would consider like a normal time frame is pre-revenue and deep tech, and everything else is taking a lot longer than usual, because as Jace sort of alluded to earlier, a lot of the VCs in the region are now spending more time than usual with their existing portfolio companies to make sure that they get through this slowdown relatively unscathed. And that's taking a lot of time away from looking at new investments. And then again, as Jace, as you mentioned, there is just a lack of clarity right now around valuations. And particularly if you've already got a product, already got revenue, already made certain commitments in previous funding rounds to, a level of growth that maybe you haven't achieved. So if you fall if you don't sort of tick the pre-revenue or deep tech bucket, you may want to just focus on like bootstrapping and building out like the business case and just building a network for when things begin to normalize again, and they will at some point.
Yeah,
VCs will write checks again.
I think that's true. And one other point I'll add to that. So Jason Calacanis said to us, valuations have come down a lot. Any deals that are happening have come down significantly. But let's focus on, I guess, the safe, because in a market that's uncertain, when they're going slower and valuations are really difficult, the safe's your friend. I would suggest 8 or 9 out of every 10 deals right now is happening on a safe, whether it be pre-seed's normally a safe or a convertible note, depending on the country you're in and the investor preference, because some investors prefer a note, some are safe. I don't really care one way or the other. I think they're both very similar documents for all intents and purposes. And some countries, specifically for say tax and all the law or whatever, would preference a note versus a safe. But let's just use the term safe, unless somebody wants to, to sort of really be specific about it. Benefits of a safe, from my perspective, you don't really have a valuation. They can be done, bit by bit. So you could do 100,000 one month and 200,000 the next month, and like you can do it over time. You can actually sign safes with different terms with different investors, although there are some disclosure issues with that. You should probably try and be fair about what you tell your investors, because you can get yourself in a muddle if you've got too much of that going on. But there's more flexibility, right? There's less legal cost. So that, and they're well known to be used for bridging rounds, or whatever we call these rounds, when you might not have hit the milestones that you said you were going to hit, but you need another 12, 18 months of funding to get you through this period. And anyone want to add to that? Ashwin, what's your experience with safes? Have you had to use one yet? Are you thinking about it? Pros and cons?
Yeah, so our pre-seed was on a safe note. To give some benchmarks to the team, Flash normally, and it's a standard deal, so I can talk about this, they take 30% of your company and they give you 500,000 USD. We did not take that deal. It didn't make sense for us because Flash's model is you're a good founder, you're a smart person, but you don't necessarily have an idea or a team, so they help connect you with both, right? We had the team and we had the idea and we had a precedent and we had a deck, which back in 2021 was plenty, now it's worth nothing. But with all things, we're able to get a much better valuation. And just to give you guys benchmarks, we ended up for 1.2 million USD giving up 20% of the company on a safe note. Why did we do a safe versus a price round? We didn't know how to value the company, right? We had no idea. We didn't want to get into those negotiations with far more experienced VCs and investors and potentially get a worse valuation, right? So instead, we capped our safe round, and they both gave us 600K each, and both had a $6 million cap. So they both got 10%. And then we had a bunch of angels coming with an additional 100,000. And they got a bunch of different caps, which we negotiated every single one on, right? So that was how we raised. 3 things to keep in mind for your safe. First of all, the discount, right? In 2021, you could still get away with no discount, right? Which is what we did, which means that for every dollar they invest, there's no additional value they get for that from the discount. Cap, of course, was there. We had to negotiate hard on that one. And then, of course, there's stuff like, pro rata rights. I won't get into all the clauses, but there's things you need to keep in mind. And I would suggest Y Combinator's website to just go through the top lists and do your own homework on this. Don't just rely on word of mouth. It's something that you have to do your in-depth research on before you start negotiating. One piece of advice, legal fees can run amok. Do cap it. Try to insist that it's capped to a certain point beyond which the investor has to pay, or you're going to be looking at
just sign up to Cake, and there's a safe built in, and it's free, and it's like best practice, and literally you can you can go, hey, and the first 5 investors is free, so you can sign up to Cake, pay nothing, use our safe, and send and sign it. Like it's such an awesome tool. I've got one from Australia and Singapore and a bunch of other countries. You do sometimes need legal and COSEC support around those things. I'm not suggesting it's the be all and end all, but Jesus is going to save you some time and money in conjunction, with the right advisors. Sorry, go on. I just had to take that opportunity to let everyone know that was there.
No, absolutely.
It's a pretty cool feature.
Absolutely. That would have been a great value add. Of course, you will always have the lead VC asking for this and that. I think you'll be in a great position if the VC doesn't do that. So, but I think if you have a standard template like this, it's going to help.
But how's it editable? How's it editable as well? So you can put the VC's template in, or you can edit ours. So it's really, really helpful, the template that we have in Cake. Yeah.
That's great.
Can I add to that? I would say also kind of steer away from the Y Combinator template, because it's basically written with US law in mind, and therefore
there's a Singapore version. There's a
Singapore version now. Okay. Yeah.
It's been there for about. So I agree with you. The first one was okay, none of these apply, half the thing, but they've greatly modified it for Singapore. I believe there's a version for Australia. Okay. It is founder friendly, and therefore, just a suggestion: start that as your anchor point, and then move from there.
Yeah. Actually, if I can just chip in on, so we've raised with both safe notes and convertible notes. And I think these days, sort of more sophisticated early stage investors are, there's a split between people who, the safe note is basically equity, and the convertible note is from a legal standpoint, it is debt. And so if you, as an investor, you're much better off. The terms tend to be quite similar, but as an investor, you tend to be better protected by a note. But as a company raising money, I wouldn't kind of walk away from investors who want you to use a note over a safe, because they are, at the end of the day, they're quite similar in terms of the terms, and the main kind of consideration is really just legal.
Yeah. For sure. So, just to give you guys another reference point, just say you're really, really early getting into an accelerator, like StartMate does 125K on a 1.5 million post. So this is like really, really early stage. That's one valuation. Like just look at what's going on in the market. That's always one of the best ways. And then I've put in the chat that I made with a few, like over the last couple of years, I guess, we put all our learnings into this capital raising toolkit. There's tons of hacks and guides and checklists. And one of the pages in there is got a bunch of valuation methods that you can use. And one of them is the Berkus method. So if you're really, really early on, it's a nice method. You just ask these 5 questions about your company and you give yourself a score between 1 and 10. You multiply that out times 500,000 per factor, and you end up with a score evaluation between 0 and 2.5 million. It's normally just a nice, simple, fast way to have a discussion with your investors about where you see yourself and where they see you. That can also just be a nice way, to get that very, very first valuation done. And then there's a couple of other valuation methods in there that you can go to as you progress. With the more advanced ones being something like a revenue multiple, which is really like a series A or B, plus method, or like a discounted cash flow, which is again, once you've actually got some cash flows and some unit economics and proper forecasting once you're more advanced. So there's a few methods in there that you can use, and there's a link to a template in Sheets that you can copy and work through. All right, so there's a bit about safes. We talked a bit about seed series A. Let's go into preparing for a round. I think it's the hardest and longest, one of the most difficult things, founders have to do. I couldn't believe how long it took me to do my most recent one. Like I am like literally like an expert at this, and it took me forever. And I looked back and I was like, how did that happen? So just to give you a bit of context, like it's pretty full on. So, really commit yourself. It's like a full-time job for a founder for like 6 months. And so the more you can believe that and really make that time, the more successful your round is going to be. Bear in mind, though, at the moment, it could be a little bit like banging your head up against a brick wall. So like Veli said, perhaps use this period to build the relationships so that, when things loosen up a bit, you've got that network built. And sometimes it takes that long to build that amount of trust anyway. So in the toolkit, just before I hit you guys up with a couple of questions, I've got a page there for those of you that have got it, or those of you that are going to get it from the chat. If you go to the GSD section, which is getting things done, and you go, I've got in there phase checklist, and then a marketing phase checklist, and a closing phase checklist. So it was really interesting, Veli, when you sort of suggested going through those 3 phases as well today. Sounds like we're both singing from the same hymn sheet, which is cool. So Veli, let's talk about the preparation phase, because it is the biggest phase. For me, there's a trigger point where you go to marketing. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you see the preparation phase, what's important there, and perhaps also help the guys understand when are you ready to go to the marketing phase?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question, and it's a big topic. But I think fundamentally what you're doing in a pitch deck is you're telling a story. And before you can actually pull a pitch deck together and go speak to investors, you need to figure out what your story is. And I think with all early stage companies, if we're not going through like a major pivot sort of every year, we're certainly micro pivoting sort of quarter on quarter as new opportunities arise, as something that you thought was interesting turns out to not be interesting. And therefore, year to year, if you're growing at 50, 100, 200% a year, as kind of maybe many kind of early stage businesses do, your story is evolving, and you've got to basically be able to go figure out kind of where are you at a point in time, what's your journey been over the last 12 months, and from that, what is your journey over the next 12 to 24 months. Because you're doing a fundraise to essentially have the capital to continue the journey for another 12 to 24 months, ideally 24, not 12. And so I think, for me, the most important is, figure out what story you're going to go tell the market. And I think this is where, if you have even if you're kind of super early stage and you've raised no money, this is where friends, family, advisors, other startup founders come in, and you need to go collect all the data around the opportunity that you see and figure out how to kind of push that into a story that is going to resonate with investors. And then in terms of the marketing, pull together a pitch deck. And I hope there's not too many VCs on this call, but you then want to bucket all the VCs, right? And you want to have VCs that you think are unlikely to invest in you for whatever reason, and VCs that may invest in you, and the VCs that you'd give an arm to get onto your cap table. And I think what you do is you come up with a deck, and then you go out and you essentially crash test it with VCs that either you don't think are a good fit, or that for whatever reason you don't actually want to work for. Maybe there's they have a reputation in the market which doesn't kind of meet your expectations. So yeah, it's really like if you think of how you do marketing these days, it's all A/B testing. Come up with a strategy, roll it out on a small scale and see what response you get, and then just keep iterating your deck. And yeah, I mean, it's I guess the other thing is, if you don't work out outside or at home, like, get yourself to a gym and sign up, because it's physically and mentally draining to go through fundraising.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I talk a lot about founder mental health. Like, you really do need to be in good shape, meditating, like writing down your purpose every day, like super staying dialed in, because like it is such a hectic, draining experience if you're not on top of your game.
Guys, sort of interrupt, but just on that note, my birthday was yesterday, and my wife got me a meditation tool. It was a hint. It was a pretty big by me. So yeah, they're right. You need to figure out your stress. And I'm getting a lot of tips from my wife. So
yeah, music. Yeah, for me it's music, fiction, exercise, and I try and get that all in like before the day starts, because once
at the same time, so you're running and you're reading and you're like
I used to, but I don't anymore. I try and do them sequentially now. It's a lot more fun.
That's very leisurely. That's nice. You've become successful, mate.
I'm older. I can do that. So, no, but I think, yeah, you got to really kind of take that into account, because it's a pretty brutal experience. Yeah, I mean, I think
it's so nice of you to call that out. Like, it's really, really nice. I think it's really important for those that you don't prioritize your health, that that don't take the time, that don't have balance, and you're grinding and you're raising on top. Like, you're really high risk of burnout, and you're going to be hurting your team. You're going to be hurting your family, and like it's a risk of wrecking your company. So please, if that is you, like, take a step back, see someone, like, talk to your friends. This is important stuff, especially now when it's hard. Like, there's a lot of stress for founders. So that's really nice you brought that up, Veli. It's so important.
Yeah. I mean, I've got my gizmo as well. I don't know if you guys all know this. I treated myself to an Oura ring, which tells me
I've got one too.
There you go. Tells me if I'm sleeping properly.
Yeah.
Amongst other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is, mate. You've got to keep your energy there and connecting to your purpose. I mean, one of the things I always coach founders right at the beginning of the capital raising is like, why are you effing awesome? I hope that doesn't upset anyone, but like, if you don't know why you're awesome, if you can't, and it's hard, especially for Aussie founders, like, we're so like always like, trying to keep it chill or whatever. But like, if you can't pitch with power, if you're not connected to that, then why are people going to come on that mission with you? Why are they going to feel like you can all be the train and change the world? So I think that's super, super important. It gives you so much energy, because people are going to be doubters, right? Why are you working so hard? Why are you doing that? That's crazy. But if you're connected to your purpose, like, it's just like a force field around you. Now, you don't want to be stupid as well. Like, as a founder, like, you do need to take these capital raises as a bit of a sanity check, like, don't run yourself into the ground. Have nice risk management processes in place with your investment, because startups are an investment, and your time is an investment. But at the same time, if you're getting the right signals, put your little cape on and like go for it. And if you're not sure and you can't pitch with that passion, get some coaching, get some mentoring, bring that out, because it's really going to be critical for the success of your raise, especially those first couple of raises when there's not much to invest in but you, whoever's pitching, and your co-founders or whatever. So like make sure you connect into that. Hey, Ashwin, did you have or did I cut you off, Veli? I didn't mean to. I get a bit exuberant in these discussions, and I do jump in. I'm known for that. So sorry, mate.
No, I don't think you did. I don't think you did.
Let's bring Ashwin in and say g'day. What do you reckon, Ashwin, around preparing for raising, just on that preparation phase, mate?
Yeah, sure. I just like stress three things for anybody who's doing it for the first time. If you're doing it for the second time, you probably know as much, if not more, than I do. One is problem, right? Like, love your problem. I've said this from day one. I keep saying it to my team. I reaffirm the problem or problems that we're solving every month, every town hall, every all hands, right? Because like a lot of naive or first stage founders, I was like, this is a problem, this is a solution, this is how we're gonna get there, right? And then what you find out is pivot, solution changes, goalpost changes. You get new data as you go along, because in the beginning, you're just a hypothesis and maybe you have some success somewhere else with another company, but it's not the same market, right? So the solution may change, but if you really love the problem, whether it's boredom or fear or trust or whatever you can boil it down to, that's going to keep you motivated and keep your team really like hawk-eyed on the goalpost, right? Which may change, right? But at least they'll understand what they're solving for. And that also ties into motivation, right? When it starts lagging, you're like, guys, this is the problem. Let's get back to it, right? Does this feature really solve it? The number two is like, and I already mentioned this, the solution is going to change. It's not the end of the world if you get some different data, whether it's through a minimal viable product or through your surveys. You're like, okay, we pitched this product, doesn't work, we got to change it. Most VCs will understand, like that's part of the process, and you just need to be transparent and update your investors on angels on why you made the change and what you're moving towards, right? So that's the second thing during a pitch. Be mindful that you're telling them a solution, but it's probably going to change. There's a statistic behind it as well. It's like 90% of startups end up with a totally different solution. And the final thing is structure your VCs, right? So I think Veli touched upon this. Whether you segment them based on the industry, right? So they may be food versus clean tech versus whatever, right? Depending on where you are, structure them, right? Do it based on industry, do it based on geography, do it based on whether they look at their portfolio. Are they B2B focused or B2C focused? They have a less likelihood of investing in you if you're in the other bucket. And then of course, fund size. The larger the fund size, chances are more, well, it'll be a bit harder to sign them on board, but at the same time, we never know, right? They might just believe in you. So I always say, like, that's no reason not to pitch to a Horowitz or a Sequoia. So yeah, I think those are three things to really focus on for early stage founders. Get those right. And I would again say, just really buckle up. It's a lot of rejections. Very few people get a yes immediately. You just need to really develop that thick skin. And I'm not saying don't listen to the feedback, acknowledge the feedback, write it all down, and then decide which ones you want to sort of actually act upon, and the others are just like
mostly ignore it. Sorry.
Yes, I'm going to interrupt you here. Yeah, I would 100% agree. Like, absorb the feedback, but you'll find if you think it through, most of it you should ignore.
Yeah. Y Combinator has a great video on this, which is like, oh my God, I met the guy, and then I actually took 10 minutes or 5 minutes to write a reply, and then they pivoted, and oh my God, like, do not listen to me. Like, I already talked to you for half an hour and you've been working on this, for a year. Like, take it in, write it all down. If it's all the same, then, okay, like you might have missed something, but like, there's so many reasons why an investor won't invest. They normally, unless they're an angel, angels might do like a deal a month or whatever. And some of the big funds, they'll be doing multiple deals a month, but most of them are doing like just a handful of deals a year, and they're getting pitched hundreds of times. So just do the math, right? There's so many reasons why they won't invest. And quite often it's because they just met you. Most of the deals, for say a pre-seed, 3 to 6 months, or seed, like a year, and Series A is like 1 to 2 years. They need to have known you for a long time. They need to care about what you're doing. They need to care about you. They're going to be on your board probably. So there's like getting married, so like just think about how difficult it is for them to actually make the decision that you're that one person in that whole 6 months or whatever that they're going to get married to. Like it's pretty full on. So just be aware, like there's lots of reasons why they won't invest. I like what Ashwin said, like the big funds with a lot of money to deploy where they're just like spraying it around, they can be your friend, right? Because you want help second, you want money first and help second, like not to be a dick to investors, like just get the money and then back yourself to go and do the right thing with it. So one other thing I always really try and stress, and the biggest mistake I think I see, you know, besides getting your pitch all wrong, which Veli's really covered, so I won't go into, but like, I really feel like founders, especially in the first couple of rounds, they're raising before they have enough investors in there, in there for CRM. Like you need to know a lot of investors. They need to know you before you raise. So if you need $1 million and your average check size is going to be, say, you might get one big one and then some smaller ones. Just say you need 10 investors, right? You're going to need like, I don't know exactly what the exact number is, 50 to 100 investors at the top of the funnel. And you really want like half of them to know you before you raise, right? Or all of them ideally. And that doesn't happen overnight. So you got to meet them and then you got to try and get them on a call. Then you got to send them your deck and then some of them will reply. And then it's a big, long process. And so I've given you guys an investor CRM, and the Lanturn guys have put some cool resources in the chat as well. There's a big process of getting a warm investor list that you should do in the preparation phase before you go to the marketing phase. What that allows you to do when you're in the marketing phase is control the narrative of your round. Everybody talks about FOMO. Investors want to invest in the rounds they can't get into. If you go into the round confidently knowing that there's 20 investors on your list that really could invest and you only need 8 of them, you're able to run your round much more strongly with tighter timelines, tighter turnarounds, stronger narrative. You'll actually go into DD with a couple of investors, then immediately tell all the rest of them we're going into DD, right? And would you like to participate? Be very respectful of their processes as well. Make sure that you're giving them enough time to do their process. So this is a professional communication. They're not trying to lie or cheat or steal anything, but you're creating energy. And so you want to build a big enough list, run a professional process, communicate clearly, turn the volume up as you progress through with some investors, try and bring more investors into those discussions, get as many into DD as you can. Once you get a term sheet, then it's like, right, I've got a term sheet. Who else wants to be part of this? And if you're lucky, you'll get multiple, and then you can go out and close. If you get one and the terms are good, great. Then you go into the closing phase where you go and you get, you go out to everyone else you spoke to and you said, now I've got a term sheet. We're just doing the preparation phase. All right, so we finished the preparation phase. We've only got 10 minutes to go. We haven't got a lot of questions, so I think we'll just keep cruising through. If you do have questions, now would be the time. We'll try and run through them in the last 10 minutes. So anything we haven't covered, anything that you want to know, anything we talked about that's been confusing, please do go into that. Let's talk about the marketing phase now. So we've got a good pitch deck. We've got enough investors. We're going out and we're going to try and get someone to give us a term sheet. Veli, any tips? How's this process run from your perspective? What can we help the crew with on the marketing phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm very lucky in the sense that we have just some amazing people and institutions on our cap table, and so I actually just lean on them. Like I think between my
it's better once you have great investors aligned to you, isn't it? Everything gets easier. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think so we're now at the point where I can go to sort of 3-4 people on my cap table who between them know like every major early stage investor, certainly in this region and many in Europe and in the US as well. And we sit and we strategize and we come up with lists, kind of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 funds that we reach out to. I think if you're not at that stage, it's literally like try and get to in-person events. Actually, we're hosting one next month where there'll be a bunch of early stage investors on a panel talking about their mindset in the current environment, and go basically buttonhole them at the end of the session. and arrange a coffee with them. And then it's just the slow incremental process of, at the end of every meeting with a potential investor, either now, 6 months out, or a year or 2 years out, just say to them, so who else should I meet? Like, which other fund should I be talking to? And can you introduce me? Right. And it's a real slog.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, I've been in Singapore now for 11 years. I used to sit inside one of the VCs, and so I was kind of like I was on that side of the desk for a while as well. And you kind of just over time kind of meet all the major players. But looking around at the kind of ecosystem in Singapore, I now realize there's 200 VCs and I know about 20 of them. So yeah, it's really, and I think you touched on accelerators and incubators earlier. I mean, that's a great avenue as well. I mean, the obvious ones are Antler and Iterative, and there's quite a few others. There's many others as well in Singapore. But yeah, it's also good to go talk to them. You don't always get as Ashwin noted, you don't always get great terms out of them. But if it's the first check through the door and you can't bootstrap it, or you can't figure out how else to get that check, then yeah, it's that may be not a bad choice.
Yeah, nice. We've had a question come through about how to put a bit of pressure on a safe, because sometimes safe I feel a bit loose, a bit sort of open-ended, and so they might not have a lead investor, so it can feel a little bit trickier. Ashwin, you've said in the chat that you're keen to share on this, mate. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, we frankly, we did exactly this. We had 3 VCs. It was a lucky time for us, right? We ended up going with 2. What we did was one VC came in with a specific set of terms. We used that VC, and some may be flinching at this, but we then went and pitched to 2 or 3 others. We're like, we got these terms. Can you please, like, we're happy to just sign this deal now, right? But we really want to work with you. Will you give us the same amount of cash for better terms, right? Then the second VC agreed. Then we did a little bit back and forth until they also got a little like, okay, right? We didn't want to burn the bridges at that point. So we're like, okay, we managed to get the best terms. We did leverage, right? I think everyone does it. And in the end, we signed. And to be frank with you, like 8 months later, one of the VCs told me, hey, you could have actually gone a little bit further. You would have touched a little bit more. Just letting you know now that we're friends. So that's just one way, right?
Yeah.
Sign one.
It's part art, part science. Part art, part science. I mean, one other way you can do it is just get one person to sign. So just say you're raising a $500,000 safe. Get 25K, get 50K, get someone to sign the safe, and then tell everyone else you're closing. So obviously you have to have a minimum amount that you can live with. So you might want 600, but you can really live with 250 or a couple of hundred even, right? And you can get somewhere down the track with that. Can't always do that, but sometimes you can operate in that space. So you get your 25 or 50, and you just put a close on it. You say, look, in 2 weeks we're closing, and you tell everybody that, and you get as much as you can, and you might hit your limit, or you might not. If you don't, and you can live with that, and the people that are signing the safe are happy to to go ahead at that level, because they need to be comfortable that you can run the company with that amount of money, and you're not going to like ditch into the ocean in a really short space of time. So you're going to be a little bit careful with that, but you can run sort of rolling closes with a safe, and it can create a bit of energy. And then with that bit of funding, you can hit some more milestones. We certainly did that with our first round. We closed our safe a couple of times. With that money, we hit some milestones, and then once we had a bit of momentum, we were able to do our seed round because we were in a much better position with some traction. So there's another idea, how to create a little bit of energy around a safe as well. Another question here: what is the best questions to ask an investor during your first coffee meeting to gauge interest? I would say ask them what they've been investing in, how many investments they've done that year, and get the names of the companies. So this is the reverse question. It's very important, especially with angel investors, to know that they are investing and that they're investing in your niche, because that's just the quickest way to qualify them. Most angel investors, if you're a good deal and you get a lead, and you're in their space, like you're quite a good chance of getting their money, like, because they're just trying to get deal flow with a good lead. So that would be the best question I could think of. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends what you're looking for from your investors. I think once you get to kind of slightly later stage where you are like where the business has some momentum and things are going pretty well, and you're hitting targets and there's kind of interest across the board. I tend to be, I'm not sure VCs like being put on the spot, but I'll tend to ask them, you know, which investment did you create the most value and what did you do? Is one that not every VC wants to answer. And then another one is, I mean, it's less about creating value, but like, which investment are you most proud of? And it kind of
learn a lot about them from that.
Yeah, because you can see what their values are. So I asked this question to somebody recently, and I know this guy quite well, and I just got an amazing answer out of him. So he's made a lot of investments over the years, a lot of amazing investments as well. And he talked about this company that was building sort of nursing homes in Indonesia and building technology around how to essentially introduce best practice across that space in Indonesia. And so, yeah, you kind of learn a lot about people when you kind of get them to talk about the things that they're most passionate about. And then the flip side is you can ask them, what's the worst investment you've made, or what's the investment where you contributed the least, and how would you do it differently this time? I think with that, it kind of tends to have one term sheet in your pocket before you really pin them down. But
nice. Well, we've got time for two final questions. Tim said, Jason, since closing around with Jason Kattoulas, how has your mindset on investing changed on Australia versus US investors for your area of SaaS? So, you know, we've only done one deal, so it's hard to learn too much from one transaction, but I feel like I've learned a few things from it. And look, everything's changed 2022 versus 2021. So like, and every round is different. So like, I don't mean to dodge the question, but you know, in general, there's more investors in the US. They'll move a little bit quicker. The valuations can be a bit higher. These are in general terms. I feel like the process can work more quickly in the US than Australia. But there's very good investors in Australia and the US and Southeast Asia. You need to do your homework, you need to understand the timeframes and the processes of the investor. You know, I think a lot of it, almost every round is controlled by the founder and the startup, not the investors. But the founders don't know that, and they think that it's the other way around. So the biggest lessons I've always had is that, you know, control the round, control the narrative, do the homework, do the work. And Jason Kattoulas, we were just the right place in the right time. And like Ashwin sort of said, it felt like we were lucky, but it was all the work we did in the year prior that got us that luck. So I hope that I didn't dodge that question too much. One other thing I will say is that investors only invest in companies that operate in their countries, you know. So I think we're a little bit lucky that Jason Kattoulas was trying to invest globally, and he was really increasing his footprint globally because there was a lot of money in the US chasing, you know, not enough deals. And so there's a lot of dynamics normally at play that you know, it's just really difficult to replicate, honestly, from year to year. So I feel like I didn't answer that question too well, but at least it was honest. Ashwin, there's a question from you here. Could you expand on some of the challenges you faced in effectively replicating a US company in Singapore?
Yeah, certainly. And considering the time, I'll be really brief. Number one, payments and solutions are incredibly behind in the US compared to this region. So problems which exist there have already been solved here 5 years back, right? Something to keep in mind, payments is something every startup is going to run into at some point, and there's already almost a solution here which doesn't exist in its level of convenience in the US, right? Number two, monopolies. Singapore, Southeast Asia is full of monopolies such as Grab. I haven't worked in a single startup in 8 years here which hasn't run up against the wall of Grab. Grab will take your product, discount it by 50% and sell it in what would likely spark massive antitrust movement in most of Europe, but in Southeast Asia, they're a darling child, right? So no matter what you do, you're gonna hit up one of those 2 or 3 big tech monopolies who likely have one small app in their super app, which is copying what you're doing or what anybody else is doing, and then just discounting it, right? So again, a big challenge, which you don't necessarily have in the US. And then finally, just investors. Investors are on average more risk-taking in the US. There's more of them. They're more keen to back younger, less experienced entrepreneurs. I think even during a downturn, it's just average is more risk-taking there. Whereas in Singapore, it's always a bit like, hey, do you have a precedent? Has somebody done this before? Have you done this before, right? Then really does the conversation become a bit easier in that sense. I think those are
on the flip side, I think sometimes the US investors are happy to let you fail faster as well. So, you know, sometimes that's not so good for you in the long run. So sometimes taking a little bit more time, like, so you got to be, you know, everything has its ups and downs, and normally the two sides of the same coin. So I'm going to have to wrap us up. We're right on time. I feel like this was a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. You both like came at it with lots of experience and energy and care for the people on the call. And I think that was evident and important. Hopefully you guys all felt that. There's in the chat, there's been tools and guides and like links to Lanturn and Cake websites where there's like events and all sorts of cool stuff. We're really proud to partner with Lanturn, and we're looking forward to, you know, progressing that, particularly in Southeast Asia. And so thanks, Veli. Thanks, Ashwin. Thanks everyone for joining. We're 1 minute over, so I'm going to call it there. And yeah, have a good afternoon.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ashwin. Say hi to Sandra for me.
See you all.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.